Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Como Factor podcast. I'm Sonal Trevetti.
And I'm Christine Strobush. Change is hard. Transformative change can feel overwhelming and out of reach. When you use the Como Factor as your guide, you will discover that you can accomplish more than you ever thought possible.
Join us on this journey as we discuss real life, personal, and professional transformation stories to inspire you to take action and achieve true transformation with sustainable results. Excited as we have a wonderful guest with us today, Mark Algar. Mark has led such an interesting life, and right now we have the pleasure of sitting down with him over a cup of coffee and getting a glimpse of a couple of transformations that he has gone through. Mark is a true Canadian, born in the Yukon Territory, which is just adjacent to Alaska, and he also did his university education in that area. Mark, I understand that with your formal university education, you received a double honors Bachelor of Mathematics in Computer Science, Combinatorics, and Optimization from the University of Waterloo. Now, the computer science is pretty straightforward, and most people would understand what that entails. What is combinatorics? What did you learn and apply when you got a degree in something like combinatorics and optimization?
Well, basically, thanks. A very good question. Optimization is how do you put pieces together in a better way, a more efficient way. Combinatorics is simply how do you count? And counting 1, 2, 3 is easy, but if you're counting the number of people or the number of grains of sand on a beach, you sometimes need higher level of mathematics. But it's basically how do you count, and then how do you optimize how those things behave together. So combinatorics and optimization, it's really something that's often called operations research in some places, or and it's the engine of business transformation, as I found out after I graduated.
So after university, Mark, you started your career in programming, but soon after you shifted to improving the performance of companies, which involved a lot of what we do in the transformation world, which is around people, teams, processes, and computer software and technologies. So let's fast forward just a little bit. And I know firsthand that you've spent a better part of your career working in business transformation. Your passion, interests, and successes in business transformation have truly enabled you to travel the world. And from what I understand, you've had roles in Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and also France. And with all these experiences and travels, I believe all the skills that you learned were put to the test and very useful in your last position before retirement, which was transforming the engineering systems team at an industrial company. So you essentially molded this team, right, into a proactive, tight-knit, and effective team using a lot of change management strategies, which I just love. If your life story were to be published in a book, what would that book title be, Mark? And what would the cover say?
I would have to say "Tripping Through Life" would be the appropriate title. With tripping meaning perhaps day tripping, which is what I originally thought. Right after I got married, I saw a book on day tripping, but also the fact that life is full of faux pas and missteps and miscommunication and everything. And oftentimes some of the nicest stories are when I do something silly or wrong or that has downstream consequences. So tripping through life, I think, would be perfect.
That would definitely also be a chapter in my life. Tripping through life. That is fantastic. Did you ever have a nickname, Mark, growing up or even now? Do you have a nickname?
For a short period of time, I had a nickname, Marcus Aurelius. And this was when we were doing Roman history in school, grade 5. And I'm not sure why, either because Marcus Aurelius is 4 syllables longer than my actual name, Mark, or because I fumbled the football on the team my class team at the time. In any event, after that year, the nickname wasn't used anymore. So, um, but that was it for a short period of time, Marcus Aurelius.
Love that. So, what are some of your life goals, Mark? Can you talk a little bit about what those entail for you?
Uh, yes, one of the most important ones now and before is never give up your search for new knowledge. Um, so important when you change, say, from a uh, engineering type environment to a painting environment. Um, but always, I've always put myself in a situation where I can learn, respect those who learn more, and listen. You learn so much more by listening rather than talking. So those are probably the two. And uh, everybody makes mistakes, so I tend to scratch my head for about 3 seconds and move on when I make a mistake. It's you'd be amazed how many mistakes you can make. That's one of the reasons I'm sticking with oil painting, by the way, is that if you make a mistake, you can paint over it. It's much more repairable, say, than watercolors, which is I tried that for a while 20 years ago, and I'm not good enough to be a watercolor painter yet.
I'm sure you're going to surprise us in the near future with that as well.
Well, Mark, again, I want to just thank you for being here with us. I think you and I've known each other for many years now, and I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you as we move on with the conversation if you remember when and where we first met.
That would be in Paris in a meeting room at the headquarters of the company uh, that we worked for at the time. Uh, I believe the environment was a meeting about a future transformation, if I recollect.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have fond memories of walking down the street. I think it was Rue La Boétie and then Champs-Élysées, just talking to you and meeting you, and I think you and I had a great connection from that first from that first time. You and I've been friends. I've considered you a mentor. We've been colleagues, for many years. And there's so many things that I respect and admire about you. And one of those is that you're an incredible, inspirational storyteller.
Mm.
And I think you have this way of telling stories, and you lean in also to your point about always acquiring knowledge and learning. You lean in to listen to others as well, and you really invest in people. So let's start with a story. Maybe you could tell us about one of your more meaningful transformation experiences, and let's start perhaps with the professional.
Okay. Let's start with a story that actually worked out, because an awful lot of transformations struggle and sometimes only deliver part of what they're intended to deliver. So I'll start with a, a good story, a successful story, and then we maybe chip away at what some of the other transformations that I've done that have not done so well. And this was a transformation of all the areas of Europe put together for this corporation. At the time I entered the picture, there were 34 different processes, different teams in the countries scattered across Europe. And the intent, the vision, was that all of these people work with the same processes on the same tool, and with basically a consistency of team management as well. So we started off, and one of the reasons I think I was successful is there was a passionate, visionary leader, a single person who saw in his mind uh, what it was that we were trying to build, and pushed and cajoled and twisted arms and made sure that the consistency of that vision reflected itself in who he had on the team and the direction he gave me. Now, he happened to be a senior man. He retired in the middle of the transformation. But before he retired, he found someone with the same vision, with the same energy that could carry it on. So I basically had consistency of strong leadership who I could use to make sure everybody was in line.
So, Mark,
Very-
I think you've set a good stage here. I think there's probably many people who work in organizations that have fragmented systems or fragmented processes, and part of transformation is driving to that common standard set of processes and technologies. So we talk here about this visionary. This guy had a vision. Could you share with us, how did he communicate that vision? Because if the people don't understand the vision, then how are you going to get them to line up and make that vision a reality?
Well, initially, he talked about what he wanted to achieve through the heads of the different parts of the company. They happen to be area presidents, for instance, CFO, other very senior level executives. And there was not alignment initially, but he did commit to doing something that they all agreed. So he risked the success of the transformation by saying, you guys together are going to form a steering committee and going to make sure that every bit of our step forward will be sufficient and adequate for your line of business. So he trusted that the executives would work together in a team way, make compromises, and go forward. So that was probably, he was a visionary, but one person cannot do a transformation. So he started building this team out, and that was maybe 15 to 17 people, each of them heads of their respective, and together they represented all of the areas that were going to be impacted by the transformation. So that was key. And then the third one, the third key, I think, to the transformation was all the aspects of change management. And he started communicating top down. So make sure the executives are on board, that they weren't going to be any unaligned communications or speaking going on that would undermine the transformation. So it started top down. And I think the people who were working, and it was an order processing process that we're working on, the people who were working in the process didn't actually hear about it for the first 3 or 4 months until he made sure that the leaders were all aligned, at least on the broad scale. The detailed work is what took me, a year and a half. And in
And then,
fact,
sorry, I'm just gonna jump in here. That leadership alignment is so fundamental when you're looking at business transformation. And so I can imagine with a company of the size and scale that you were dealing with, there was a lot that this gentleman had to invest in to get that alignment across all of these parties. If you're talking 16, 17 leaders across the organization.
Mm,
Did you ever see that, you might have one or two that really gave the lip service but weren't on board?
indeed, there was one particular person who was quite strong, had worked in a number of different leadership roles in the company. And it was a little bit like, that is an excellent transformation, but it doesn't fit my business model. So it's okay if I withdraw and do something that is similar, but we really are unique. And that took a bit of help. Um, we didn't ever agree with him stepping aside. We said, we're at the top level of the process. Would you agree that if you break down the whole order entry process from lead management all the way through shipping the goods and invoicing them, would you agree it approximately works like this? And he would have to say yes, because it's textbook, right? Every single
Right.
order entry process in the world works the same 5 steps. That was it from top to bottom. And he had to agree with that. I said, well, we haven't defined the rest. So why don't your team get involved and work with us to make sure that it does suit your business? And we wore him down. Actually, it took a good couple of months, lots of meetings. And we said, well, this is all we've got done so far. And you've just said it meets you. Let's go. And a year later, he was one of the strongest supporters of the project, because we developed a trust that we weren't going to do anything to torpedo his business. We were going to be flexible and inclusive. And in some cases, if you go down 4 levels in the process, you'd say, if it's configured to order, you go this way. If it's shipped from inventory, you go this way. And the nuances of how the different businesses operated, all within a single process, all within a single tool.
Right.
So we got him.
He had to join the team. He had to get on the field and not be a spectator.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
What also helped is that as the executive leader, basically the COO of the company worldwide, if there was someone who didn't appear at one of the monthly governance meetings, if that person sent a delegate who was only say a senior vice president rather than themselves, uh, they would receive a physical visit from the executive asking what the problem was and why did he think that this key project uh, was beneath him. So we had such active, strong participation. I mean, I took attendance, of course,
Mhm.
and that certainly helped shame people into attending. But we had the right people at the table every month. Again, lots of listening. When we got into change management, one of the people in one of the further areas from France said they came up with this spider diagram for assessing the strength of the team members that were being chosen to fit this new order entry team. And it was so good at identifying either where we have to put in extra training as part of change management or finding new candidates who would have the right skills to be part of the team. We rolled that same process out across the entire scope of the project. And it was key to our success too. When you get down to change management and asking people who are sitting at the desks doing order management and saying, are you aware of the transformation? Do you know how your job is going to change? Do you have the skills today? Or can you take this course or this course or this course? It was a repeated, uh, I would say, putting them in an environment where it was easy for them to catch on with the new process or learn. And in fact, some people didn't fit the new process. And we made sure that they had other jobs that they could do that wouldn't slow us down.
I was just gonna say, with getting down to the individual employees doing the work, it's key when you think about change management to capture their hearts and their minds, so they really embrace and adopt the change that's being implemented.
Yeah. And I did not meet the timeframes of the project. All right. I was 6 months late. And most of that delay was because I listened to people about their concerns, their fear that this customer needs this kind of process. We have a contractual agreement that we've got to do it this way, and to make sure that they were brought into the team, that we took care of it. So the overall project wasn't a year and a half; it was 2 years. But the savings as a result were about twice what was estimated to occur. So we ended up, after it was over a year and a half after the project ended, we were 40 million euros a year savings continuous uh, in a continuous way. So it's you got to go fast, but you have to make sure that everybody needs to go on the team together.
Now that's for those project management people out there. What I've just heard is that the quality of delivering your scope needs to be more important than your deadline in this case. So Mark, and the team were 6 months later than originally planned, but this was a massive transformation, but they delivered, some incredible savings for the company. So that was a great lesson, a great lesson there. So, Mark, at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about some transformations don't succeed, and in fact, we've got some data that indicates that 70% of company transformations actually fail. So, were there any notable failures that you've experienced, and what kind of lessons could you share with our listeners from those failures?
Well, I would say one of the first ones was uh, not getting agreement at the top, and this was a large transformation that was going to cost over 100 million euros, just the cost of the project. And 6 months in, we had a fundamental breakdown in what the detailed scope was. And
Wow.
the executives had not sat down with the leader of the team and agreed on the details of how it was going to impact their team and what was the broad brush approximate process, what was the scope, and what was that they were trying to achieve. As a result, The project was significantly downsized. It was cut into pieces, and the value was never achieved. And as a result, some years later, the company continued to lose money and was sold.
Mm-hmm.
They just never quite. So that was one. That was probably the most significant, and something that could have been addressed in the first months if it had been done like the successful project, which is make sure that your leadership team is on board and aligned at the broad level, broad brush, before you get into the details.
Right.
Um,
So when we think about, delegation, what I hear you saying is, these leaders delegated their accountability as opposed to responsibility. So they didn't show up at the table to drive that leadership alignment. They pushed it down and, to people lower in the organization, and you weren't able to get that buy-in and alignment to implement the vision.
yeah, a non-compliant basically to what was trying to be achieved.
Right.
Another one uh, earlier in my career was where the scope was clear. Uh, but then after a couple of weeks of looking at it and beginning to propose what resources, what talent I needed to bring in order to do it, they said, "Oh no, you have to do it within existing budget." So the scope was fairly clear, but I was not given the budget, the extra funding to be successful, to bring in the right talent, to bring in the additional players that could focus on the transformation, and while I kept the business going, my responsibilities. Um, and that was unfortunate because I think we could have more than returned the value of the transformation had we got good budget. And I would say also, if you're a transformation leader, don't allow people to say whatever budget you want, we will free up as we go. No, no, no. That is too easy for people to back up.
Yep.
But I never said 1.5 million. I was sort of thinking in my head 30,000. And no, get a concrete budget, get a concrete plan. At when I mean concrete, I mean at high level, right? The whole idea of a transformation is you don't know where you're going to end up necessarily in the detail. Get that in advance before you start, before you get your hopes up that it's going to work out. So
Yeah.
those were probably the two biggest disappointments, I would say, on my transformation lifeline.
Can you reflect on why do you think some of these leaders were unwilling to fund the transformation, whereas others were?
Um, I think partly it was, but I didn't have the information at the time. I certainly did a year or two later. They were in a different place than what I saw. They were looking at getting the overall company finances in such a state that we could be profitably sold.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly this would have different ramifications if there was an expenditure on the company's books that was millions of dollars and that had not yet got to delivering its value. So the time that they were going to sell the company was before you get the returns on the investment. I wasn't aware of that until at least a year later. But that normally there's another agenda going on. If people don't get you with your program, and you actually have a fairly clear definition of what the scope is that to you seems like a no-brainer, then there's other agendas, there's other things going on, and the best thing you can do is hold off on the transformation until you do get that alignment.
Yeah, that's some very wise advice right there.
Mm.
Very, very wise. A number of our friends have asked us about how we were able to launch our podcast so quickly. I'll tell you, this whole experience has been new and exciting to say the least. Above and beyond having an amazing team, we use this incredible tool called Anchor. Sonal, why don't you share a little more about Anchor with our listeners?
Well, to record our podcast, The Como Factor, you guys, if you haven't already heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me tell you, first of all, it's absolutely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor even distributes your podcast for you so it can be heard on platforms like Spotify, Apple, and much more. You can also make a few extra bucks from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one easy to access place.
What I'd like to do now is pivot, because at the Como Factor here, we're looking at true transformation holistically. So from the business side as well as the personal side. And again, I've always admired you. Always have something exciting going on in your personal life. Could you talk to us a little bit about your more recent personal transformation journey?
Yes. So one quick view into my childhood. I was quite strong on art and English at a certain point in time, and the teachers were worried about my arithmetic and my mathematics, that sort of thing. So I got special tutoring to beef up my mathematics. Well, what happened is it turned the card upside down, and I became someone who loved math and got my bachelor of mathematics, and the rest is history on my professional career. But there was a little flame there, writing and art and building things and creating with my hand, that sort of smoldered for 43 years. And at certain points, especially when I was working in France for 4 years, where I got the opportunity to go to some of the best museums in the world and to see up close beautiful paintings and sculptures and even beautiful furniture. The the result is that I started painting again when I was in France. Well, yeah, you had to do something with your 7 weeks of vacation, um, and maybe one painting a year. And then I got back to the United States and I picked it up again. I found a coach, and it wasn't only painting that I was chasing. I got personal rewards from that, but I didn't know that I could be successful, that I could be good at it. So as I approached retirement, I had 4 or 5 irons in the fire, if you will. I thought maybe I could write, um, maybe I could write fiction. I thought I could be a guest speaker, telling people about my experiences in the project management, program management, and business transformation. Um, so all of these things put together. But then when I actually retired, one by one, these options fell by the by, uh, and I centered on painting. Found a good coach, Becky Parks in Dallas, who helped me initially in a class environment, and then one-on-one tutoring to get me quickly up the curve. Transformation, speed is important. At the same time, I was working for a living, so the budget was taken care of. All right, I had money coming in that I could spend on classes and materials and good materials, so I wouldn't be handcuffed by using lousy paints or lousy brushes or whatever. Um, and then when I did retire, got to Arizona, and there you have the Scottsdale Artist School. What a delightful professional environment to learn. Really pushed me hard up the curve with some of the teachers there. And I found my next coach, Susan Deal, who continues to give me inspiration and specific lessons and feedback on how my painting is evolved. But the writing has never gone away. So that's where I end up in writing stories of my life, such as I've shared with you today, but also illustrating those stories with my paintings. I actually took a early on, when I was writing these stories while I was living in France. There's so many funny stories about all the things I did wrong in France to begin with. But I was looking for someone to illustrate the stories, and I thought maybe a sketch artist or a painter or a watercolor or something like that. And I looked and looked, but no one was what I wanted of the people that I found. And blink, blink, 5 years later, I said, if I continue this course of study, I'll be good enough to illustrate my own stories the way I want, the way that I'm comfortable, in a couple more years of practice. And indeed, that's how it turned out.
That is just beautiful. So you've done business transformation, you lived abroad in several different countries, you've become this painter, and I'm telling you guys, Mark's artwork is beautiful, and we will provide some references to his materials in our show notes. And you're a writer, so I don't know if we've told you, but here at the Como Group, we're writing a fictional book about true transformation, and I'm telling you, it is good. Um, but what advice would you give us? Because this is our first book. It's a journey, and like you said, we're on this journey, and we will continue to learn and grow and transform every single day. So, based on the path that you've been on, what advice would you give us as we embark on this first of many books?
Um, I would say remember that the only impossible journey is one you never start. And that's from Tony Robbins. So uh, just go, just do it. But along the way, recognize that you're not the best writers in the world yet. Find the most serious complimentary editor, coach, mentor who can give you critical feedback, who you trust to give critical feedback to you on where you're weak. I had the same thing. I actually have two or three people who comment on my stories before I publish them, um, and they are sometimes extremely critical. I have someone who's working on translating my stories into French, given that they're all about France. I have some people following the stories in French, and they're saying I'm having trouble with the translation because I think your English original sucks. Uh, so, it's really neat to get someone you can trust to join you in the journey, and continue to learn. I look back at some of the stories I wrote 10 years ago, and I'd be ashamed to publish them now. But I look at something that I worked on 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, or even months ago, much better. There is actually a significant uh, amount to learn when you're writing something that's going to capture someone's imagination and transfer what you're trying to transfer to the person. So just accept that you're on the learning curve and get the best people to come in and help you with that journey.
Thank you, Mark. I love that. Yeah, we are definitely on a learning curve, including this podcast. We are learning how to do a podcast. This is our third episode, and so we'll shout out to our listeners here and let them know that our expectation is that we're going to keep getting better and better each podcast. So we'll keep learning and growing. So Mark, these have been great stories. I think you've talked about a number of elements around personal and professional transformation. I hear how you found clarity, taking ownership, not only yourself, but that leadership at the highest levels of a business organization, taking that ownership and not over delegating is key to a successful transformation. Having that mindset. I mean, I see very seasoned veteran in life, and you're seeking out coaches and mentors for these new ventures. And I think we could all learn something from that. And for sure, I will say, and I knew it when I met you more than 20 years ago, you are absolutely one of a kind, one of the most unique people that I've ever met. You give and you invest in people, and you learn about their lives, and you genuinely care. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing those stories.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to tell the stories.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Como Factor. To learn more about us, you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also visit us at thecomofactor.com. Join the Como community and get free access to valuable tools and resources.
True transformation and sustainable results can be yours too when you apply the Como Factor.